All right, this is the Big Douglas Show. It is a Wednesday, so you know we're doing fantasy football. We're going to come on here and learn a little something. As always, Nate Coleman is here in the co-host seat. Nate, how are you?
I'm still in shock over this Baker news, but not really. Excited to dive in and talk a little bit about Baker and everything else going on in the world of fantasy. So let's get to it.
And we'll do that today with our special guest, Eric Moody. Eric, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, not a problem at all. Hey, anytime someone reaches out to talk about fantasy football, I'm always on board for that. So happy to be here.
And we appreciate it. So, Eric, before we got started today, we were discussing, it's interesting. On Fantasy Football Wednesdays, for those that are on for the first time, we always try to get to know the people a little bit and find out what led them to fantasy football. We find that most of them have an interesting story. You do also. Started out Fortune 500 company. Now you're, I guess, technically at another one with ESPN, but certainly not doing the same thing. Tell us a little bit about what you were doing and what kind of led you to fantasy football.
Yeah, no, I can do that. So I've been in the financial services industry for quite some time, since 2006. Working at different firms, Merrill Lynch, J.P. Morgan Chase. Then most recently, before doing fantasy and sports betting full time over at USAA as a financial advisor and also as a manager. It was in a call center type of environment. But what ultimately led me to create fantasy football content, because I've always been passionate about helping people. And of course, I'm a fantasy football degenerate, love the leagues, love the camaraderie, love the relationships that you build. And it just led me naturally to want to help people with fantasy advice. So I started a Twitter account, put some tweets out there, had some people reach out. Have you ever considered writing? I was like, I haven't, but it is something that I'm open to. And that just kind of led to opportunities with different websites like RotoViz, Fantasy Pros, Dynasty League Football. I've written for so many sites in the industry, and I ultimately led to The Athletic and now at ESPN. So that's kind of the Reader's Digest version of my story. But to bring all that together, I would say I started creating content back in 2015. I think up at this point, I've probably written over 600 plus articles for fantasy football and basketball at this point.
And the threads are epic. I'm curious, two things about how much time. I don't think people realize how much time it takes to put those things together. So I'm curious about the time. And then do you prefer writing the articles or doing the podcast like this?
Yeah, I guess the first part of that question, with the threads and different things, I'm always kind of jotting down ideas on threads or fantasy articles. So that was kind of an extension, those threads on Twitter and social media, an extension of that. But I've always been passionate about writing, so I do like writing articles. But I found myself lately over the past, I would say 3 or 4 years, really enjoying doing live streams and podcasts, because you have a chance to inject, even more of your personality into it, and then just having the interaction with, the co-host and the guests. So it's something that's really unparalleled.
Nate, you brought up Baker Mayfield. We of course Nate does a great job every week of putting the show together. I just try my best to run it. So this was not obviously this came out 5 minutes before we started this thing here. So Baker Mayfield to the Panthers for a 5th round pick. Interesting. I saw Benjamin Solak. I hope I pronounced his last name right. Right before we got started tweeting, the Panthers traded more to move up for Matt Corral than they did today for Baker Mayfield. Shows you that the Seahawks were never interested. But also, Nate, what does this do for, assuming he has the job? I'm assuming it's his job. What does this do for a guy like DJ Moore? Does it boost? Do you like the running back a little bit more? How does this affect the weapons that we draft for fantasy football? Do you think?
Yeah, as you know, this is a Commanders podcast, first of all. So we can all relate to DJ Moore's situation with Terry McLaurin, never having a quarterback, having all the opportunity in the world, all the air yards in the world, but never gets a chance to be efficient with it because, they're not targeting him down the field or they're not accurate their passes. But I mean, this is a stock up, obviously, for DJ Moore. And it's not going to be to the levels of, your Stephon Diggs getting Josh Allen or Cooper Kupp with Matthew Stafford. But it's got to help to some degree. It's going to help the whole offense score more points. It's going to lead to more offensive drives getting in the red zone. So it's obviously going to be good for DJ Moore, but I mean, Baker Mayfield was such an obvious buy in Dynasty. I mean, it's just, he costs nothing. His value is almost guaranteed to go up. But no, I like this trade for all parties involved. I mean, gosh, I hope you traded Sam Darnold when he had a chance. I'll say that.
Eric, will this get the action on DJ good enough that you should be selling high right now? Because I guarantee you there's going to be a lot of scuttlebutt, as they say, around the wide receiver.
Yeah, I would end up still holding on to DJ Moore. I know he's someone that even before this quarterback change that I liked in drafts quite a bit. But just kind of looking at the situation like with Mayfield, like you've got Baker, a former number 1 overall pick, back in the 2018 draft. Obviously with the Browns for those first 4 years. If you look at his body of work, like in Cleveland, it's not bad. He's thrown for 14,125 yards, 92 touchdowns to just 56 interceptions. Now, here's the reality. Like Mayfield may not be the clear, we'll say, long-term solution for the Panthers at quarterback, but it does give them a chance to, to piggyback off of what Nate mentioned, to be more competitive in 2022. I think it's good for Christian McCaffrey, especially DJ Moore. Again, DJ Moore, great value in drafts right now. But I'll close on this. You look at DJ Moore, like he finished last season with a target share of 28.4%. Which is the 6th highest in the league. He also ranked 5th in air yards of 1,632. Moore has had 3 straight seasons with 1,100 or more receiving yards. And so with someone like Mayfield, it does provide him even more stability. But with Mayfield, it does even provide him a higher ceiling. So I like the trade.
Do you like McCaffrey? How high are you willing to spend on McCaffrey, Eric? And do you buy into the injury deal with him?
Yeah, with McCaffrey, it's obviously you've got Jonathan Taylor, who's going to be, your first overall pick, like in nearly every single draft. It's tough to pass up on McCaffrey at number 2. I know people are concerned about the injuries, and rightfully so. But hey, he's had a full off season. He should be healthy coming into the season, and I feel like they're going to manage his workload, a lot better. And if you look at how he's performed, like on the fantasy points per touch, with those metrics and things, he's been great. And even on a per game basis, I'm like he's been solid. So it's very difficult to pass up McCaffrey, if you have the number 2 pick in the draft. So I think he's going to pick up where he left off before.
Nate, where do those weapons now kind of rank when you look around the league for Baker Mayfield there in Carolina? Because I mean, they're not without weapons. I mean, they've got, Robbie Anderson still on that team, I think. He didn't actually retire, did he?
Yeah, Robbie Anderson just is like the human wind sprint runner. I mean, he gets air yards, but it seems like he had that one great year 2 years ago, and then after that, he's kind of an afterthought. But no, I mean, it helps them for sure. It's really just a boon to McCaffrey, really, because you don't have to worry about the quarterback like taking any rushing touchdowns. You have more scoring opportunities. When I look at running back in the first round, I only want running backs on good offenses. That's kind of my thing. Like, if I still can't see the Panthers being that good, but you can at least see them being like average. So it definitely piques my interest there. But they have an interesting skill group though. Is Terrence Marshall is he gonna bounce back? I mean, he did nothing yet last year. He was an afterthought, a lot like Diami Brown. I mean, both of these guys had a ton of opportunity when they were healthy, and they did absolutely nothing. And I understand the quarterback situation played into that, but I mean, then you look at tight end. I don't know what to think of. Ian Thomas got this giant extension. He's really a blocking tight end. And then Tommy Tremble is again a blocking tight end that, he wasn't bad last year in spurts. So like maybe one of them is more interesting with Baker, who's a guy who's kind of targeted tight ends more in his career. But we'll see. We'll see. I mean, I'm kind of interested to see what happens with this offense. Obviously, I'm a little more optimistic. But Eric, I gotta jump into these questions though. The first one, I started following you right when I joined Twitter because it's like you said, you were writing for so many different websites. It was hard. I'd be like, oh man, now he's writing for this one. But you always have really great tweets. And of course, you wrote for RotoViz, which is my all-time favorite site, even till this day. So the first question, though, it's got to come back to the life hacks. Anytime I see a thread that has life hacks or something that I can improve my actual life, that's something that always piques my interest. So my question is, like, are there any like life hacks that you can apply both to your real life and then also to your professional life and then fantasy as well? Like, can you combine the two? Do you have something like that you can think of off the top of your head?
Yeah, it's quite a few actually, because there are some parallels, if you're trying to juggle, kind of both careers. So I would say one that comes to mind immediately is like the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. With that acronym, and it's really just designed to keep things like as simple as possible. Like you want to try to avoid making things like more complex than what it needs to be. And so a lot of simple systems are more likely to be accepted, like and used. I would say something else is like a content creator. And this goes for if you have like a traditional 9 to 5 is just a structure, have more structure and processes. Because if it's something that's repeatable, when that task comes up again, you immediately know what you need to do. And you don't use up any additional, mental, kind of capacity, just trying to figure out like what to do next. And another one's like the Pomodoro technique, just kind of working in 25-minute intervals, knowing, when and where you're most productive, and just removing distractions. And I'll kind of close on this is really setting a timer for any task that you're doing, because you kind of have a deadline and a time frame, so you'd be much more productive by doing that.
Do you have a favorite football team? Does doing fantasy make it hard to have a favorite football team?
Yeah, my favorite football team is the New Orleans Saints, but it doesn't make fantasy any more difficult, by being a Saints fan. But I will tell you, it was fun during the Drew Brees era. Just obviously writing about fantasy and knowing how great Brees, was, especially during his prime. But yeah, no complications at all with being a Saints fan and writing fantasy.
What's the deal with Michael Thomas this year?
Oh, with Michael Thomas? Yeah, it's a lot of uncertainty there. And you look at Thomas's ADP and you're just like, ooh, he could easily outperform all these players around like his ADP. But the question is, will he be healthy? And is he going to be on the same page like with the Saints, just given what happened many seasons ago with, are you getting treatment in the offseason or are you not? No, I didn't get surgery. Did you get surgery? That communication breakdown was crazy to watch, publicly as we're reading these headlines and reading these articles. But it's just complicated because I just don't want to. It's tough for me when I'm doing drafts to draft Thomas at his ADP, and I believe it's at the 6th or 7th round when he's available. I just rather wait till later in the draft and pick up someone like Chris Olave, who I think could see nearly as many targets as Michael Thomas. I just don't personally believe that he's going to play a full season in 2022.
Yeah, in general, like I just like to avoid players that are injured when I'm drafting. I know that's kind of boring, but speaking of the Saints, do you have like a favorite handcuff for running backs that's maybe a cheaper running back that's on a good offense? Because I know some people right now are talking about like Mark Ingram. Not that we know the Saints offense is going to be good this year. First of all, like we can't just like Sean Payton isn't there, like Drew Brees isn't there. Like I don't know, but is there maybe a guy on an offense that you think is going to be pretty good that no one's really talking about? And I have one too to piggyback off of whatever you say. So go ahead.
Yeah, I know one that quickly comes to mind and that I've picked up in a lot of mock drafts and drafts that I've done is Tyler Algier. And if you think about, with the Falcons, you think about his background, 5th round pick, right? He's stepping into what I would call like a potentially productive position in Atlanta. Like in his last 2 seasons, college seasons with the Cougars, I know he ran for 2,731 yards, 36 touchdowns. Just from a film perspective, I'm like, he's got great vision and he's a very capable early down back, who can also contribute in the passing game. But when you look at his ability to be a 3-down back in the NFL, I think that's what sets him apart from guys on that roster, like Cordero Patterson or Damian Williams. So in fantasy football drafts, that's the kind of player that I'm willing to take a flyer on in the double-digit rounds. And again, he could be one of those players that potentially ends up becoming like a waiver wire darling or a league winner. And those are the type of players that I want to acquire late in drafts.
No, I like that one a lot. Another random one that no one is drafting, I'm kind of confused by it, is like Samaje Perine. Like, I know the Bengals offense is going to be good. I know they don't have another running back of note that can carry a workload. And I know Samaje Perine isn't sexy or anything, but like Mixon has a history of like injuries. He's really cemented there as the backup running back, and you can get him in the very last round of almost any draft. So that's a guy I've kind of been going after just really late. Another one is whoever the backup is in Arizona. I don't know if it's Benjamin. I don't know if it's Darrell Williams. But anytime there, like you talked about, anytime there's any ambiguity in the backfield, sometimes it's an opportunity to buy there. So I'm hoping one of those guys emerges and it'll be a cheap handcuff you can get later on in drafts or maybe as a hero running back candidate.
Okay. And Jamal Williams too for the Lions are like, well, if he's going to be the backup for Swift, then sign me up.
I like the Lions. Like, it's interesting. They're kind of a trendy pick for a lot of people. Like, pretty exciting for a team that's probably going to win like 7 games. I mean, I don't know. I get it though. Okay, so next question is
Okay.
two running backs who were very like undervalued last year that just were not sexy picks at all were James Conner and Leonard Fournette. And both of them kind of were similar situations. There was an ambiguous backfield. You didn't know how the split was going to go, but you knew those offenses were going to be pretty good. So I guess my question is this year, like, who is your James Conner or Lenny Fournette, a guy who's kind of going to sneak up on you, but have a really good season?
Yeah, it's one name, Saquon Barkley. I like Barkley quite a bit going into this year. I think given the situation in New York, he's positioned for a monster season. He's entered the offseason without having to worry about rehabbing any type of injury. He's got a new head coach in Brian Dable, whose offensive mind, and in my opinion, I would say is a significant upgrade for the Giants. But if you look at Barkley's statistical body of work, I know he's averaged 18.9 touches per game in his career. And you look at Dable's offense, they're expected to use him not only as a running back, but potentially in the slot, wide receiver, as a motion receiver, according to a lot of reports that I read. And I think he's a player that could exceed expectations. My second one would be J.K. Dobbins. Now, we know last year Dobbins suffered a knee injury during the preseason that ultimately ended his season. Now, if you go back to 2020, I know he worked his way up the depth chart to become the starter, had 805 yards on 134 attempts, 9 touchdowns, led all Ravens running backs. Now, as a rookie, Dobbins scored a rushing touchdown in 7 consecutive games, including the wild card playoff game against the Titans that year, which tied for the second longest streak in the NFL history by a rookie. Now, if you're looking at players that are outside like the top 45 or 50. He's one of the few running backs that does have league winning potential, and I do find myself drafting him often.
Yeah, those are great ones. I kind of thought, like, when I was thinking J.K. Dobbins, I thought a lot about Miles Sanders. It's like, these offenses are going to be good. They're going to run the ball a lot. The only problem is their quarterback can take away some of those rushing touchdowns in the red zone. But I mean, they're kind of in that dead zone, but they do have that league winning upside, just in case you're right.
Mm-hmm.
Doug, you look like you're going to say something.
Yeah, I was just curious. I was going to follow up on that Saquon deal with the Giants. Outside of the Vikings and Jacksonville, I can't think of another offense that I think gets a bigger boost from the new head coach than the Giants will.
Yeah.
On all aspects of that offense. Not that I love that real well for the Commanders in the NFC East, but I really do think that Daboll brings a huge benefit to all parties concerned on offense.
Yeah.
And Miles Sanders, to me, is another one of these guys that should have a huge year.
Yeah, and if it's not Miles Sanders, like the Podfather talked about last week, I mean, I love Kenneth Gainwell.
Right.
I mean, every draft I can get him in, because no matter what, he's going to have a role. And if Miles Sanders gets hurt, like he inevitably always does, I mean, Gainwell is a guy who's he beat Antonio Gibson at Memphis for his job. He took away Antonio Gibson's job. He's a good route runner. I mean, he checks every box really analytically. So it's a guy I really like.
What I think, real quick, Nate, I think we forget while we're in the NFC East that McKissick was injured for the last couple of games of the season last year. Before that, he was having a fantastic fantasy season.
Yeah, I mean, I read that like Antonio Gibson had less than 5 targets on third down the entire last season, and he played almost every game. So, like, I don't see that changing at all. So I don't know. I mean, he's kind of cheap, but it's just not a guy like I wouldn't get overly excited about, especially like in Dynasty. I wouldn't want to invest in him.
Yeah.
Okay. So next question, like, is there an offense that you like to take that like Bengals 2021 jump? Obviously the Bengals they have all the weapons, they have the quarterback. It's easy to say that in hindsight, but is there another offense that kind of has caught your attention that could take a big jump?
Yeah, I guess we'll keep the Giants train rolling, because the Giants, I think the Giants could be that offense. Which is surprising, is considering they ranked 31st last season with 287.3 total yards per game. But I just think that Dable's addition, it shouldn't be understated. I think that's the best way to put it. I think if this offense can stay healthy, it has the potential to be one of the NFL's best. You look at Daniel Jones. Given a situation, he's played as well as he could. He didn't have a ton of offensive playmakers surrounding him, last season. just mainly due to the health issues. You had Saquon, you got Kenny Golladay, Sterling Shepard, Kadarius Toney, all banged up. But if all four of those players are healthy, I'm like, he could have a career season in 2022, and he's going to have the coaching staff to support him. So I do like the Giants' offense quite a bit.
And a much better offensive line. I mean, he throughout his career, they've just had a terrible offensive line, which is funny.
Yeah.
Like that was Gettleman's calling card was, building the offensive line, building the trenches and establishing the run and all that. But no, I like that one just by like passing volume, Brian Dable is going to throw the piss out of the ball, and that's good for all parties involved, including Saquon, because we know how valuable running back targets are.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we're going to go into the next segment here where it's basically rookie versus the vet. Which player do you prefer and why? We're going to go by underdog ADP here. So the first one, I'm going to make these hard on you too, so get ready. The first one we got here is Kenneth Walker at pick 94 or Tony Pollard at pick 83. So they're going right around the same round. Tony Pollard is like he's the best handcuff you can get in fantasy, but he's also very expensive considering like he still is a backup. But what do you think?
Yeah, it's just given their respective situations, you're not going to go with Pollard here. I think if you look at Pollard going into this season with how he performed last year, I think he's earned the right for more touches. So I wouldn't be shocked to see him, split more touches or the backfield, I would say, with Ezekiel Elliott this year. And he could average around 10 to 12 touches per game. And I think that makes him at worst, a solid flex option, but he does carry that RB1 upside if Elliott were to miss significant time. So out of those two players, I'd go with Pollard.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. For a second, I thought you were going to say, before when I asked that question about James Conner and Leonard Fournette, I thought you might say Zeke because I've heard, that name floated around because, he's going to get the volume, obviously, like he always does, but like he's very undervalued. But I mean, obviously this is a Washington podcast, so we can't say anything good about him, but I mean,
well, they say he's healthy.
How about that?
For
shape of his life, like every other player is. With OTAs, like I don't know about you, Eric. Everyone is different. Like for fantasy, like all I care about is stuff that's predictive. So like it's one, like I want a guy to stay healthy, and then it's two, like is he running with the first team? Other than that, like I really don't care about like does he look good in OTAs? Like that stuff. It's never predictive of the future. At least like you can't quantify it to me. So I'll kind of be interested to see what happened. But that's a long-winded answer me saying like maybe Zeke is undervalued too. I don't know.
Before you jump off this one, Nate, Eric, where are you drafting Kenny in rookie drafts? Are you high on him on Walker?
No, I am high on Walker. Just given the situation he's in, it just may take a year or two for him to see significant touches, but it could happen sooner rather than later. But no, I'm perfectly fine drafting him high in rookie drafts. So
this has more to do with Pollard than it does with Walker.
Yeah, it's more so with the situation and for where he could see significant touches, I would say sooner rather than later. And he's kind of given us a taste of what that looks like last year. But it just really comes down to his ceilings, obviously capped by Ezekiel Elliott, who I agree, Nate, is a really good value right now, especially in redraft. But I just prefer Pollard right now over Walker.
All right, next one we got here is Garrett Wilson at pick 109 or Robert Woods at pick 102. I mean, Garrett Wilson, it feels like he's gone really under the radar, at least in like rookie drafts. Like I think I have 15 different dynasty teams, and I haven't gotten a chance to draft him yet. But I mean, he has a lot of upside. He's very exciting. And then Robert Woods is like the opposite. It's all about volume for him. It's like every year with Woods, it feels like the same story. Like he's not that exciting, but I mean, he's in line for a big target share, right?
Yeah, I know it's funny when you mentioned that. I was chuckling because it does seem that way. I would actually go with Garrett Wilson here. So you look at this class, the 2022 draft class. At least in my opinion, you look at Wilson. He's the best route runner. You look at what he was able to accomplish in a star-studded, we'll say, Ohio State wide receiver room. He caught 70 passes for 1,058 yards, 12 touchdowns as a junior last season. I just see him being in a very fruitful situation where he could see 100 or more targets, catching passes from Zach Wilson. And so you look at just Garrett Wilson, I'm like, he's someone that could be on the flex radar for this year. So he's my preferred option.
Where are you on Zach Wilson?
I like Zach Wilson quite a bit. I think a lot of people get wrapped up into how a player performed like during their rookie season. And I think that first NFL offseason, especially for an NFL rookie, being able to focus on football really 24/7 for a certain number of months, they can develop and grow quite a bit from that one season to the next. So I do like Wilson. You look at the front office, the coaching staff. They've been very proactive with surrounding him with talent to position him for success, really at all those important offensive positions. And I think Zach Wilson could surprise a lot of people this year. Now, I'm not saying that, okay, Zach Wilson's going to finish as like a QB1, but he's going to have some streamable weeks, and it wouldn't surprise me if he finishes as like a mid-range, QB2. So I like him quite a bit.
Yeah, Zach Wilson's a great litmus test in dynasty, because like last year he was going, top 3 pick in superflex leagues, and even this year you can still like trade him, get a lot back. I mean, it shows you like how powerful quarterback is in superflex, because like he had a terrible rookie season like most guys do. I mean, it's very typical. We'll say like every single rookie quarterback year 2, they improve their touchdown rate, they decrease their interception rate, they improve their quarterback rating, their completion percentage goes up just normally. So I mean, you can expect a boost to all these guys. I know Trevor Lawrence, a lot of people have talked about him a lot. I root for all these guys though. I mean, if there's one rookie quarterback that I just think like blows the top off the rest of them as far as upside goes though, it's still like Trey Lance, because he has so much ambiguity built into his price. He's one of the only like late round quarterbacks that has the upside to truly finish like in the top 5. And I think like late round quarterback is kind of a dying thing, at least in like a normal redraft league nowadays. Like I feel like you at least need a guy who's finishing in the top 12, and maybe you can stream that, but I want a guy who has that rushing upside, and you can't find that outside the top 12 normally. I mean, that was another tangent for me. So let's go on to the next one here. Okay. Ramondre Stevenson at pick 112 or Dameon Pierce at pick 125. I mean, these guys are a similar style of player. There's a lot of ambiguity. At least one of these offenses is probably going to be pretty decent with Stevenson. So what are your thoughts there? Who do you prefer and why?
Yeah, I do prefer Pierce. So you look at the Texans. I'm like, they desperately needed to boost their running game. You look at last season. I'm like, they finished with 1,422 rushing yards, averaging out at 3.4 yards per carry. The worst in the NFL. So they've got the boost. The boost comes with Pierce. He scored 13 rushing touchdowns for Florida in 2021. But if you look at the Texans as a team, I'm like, they only scored 8 rushing touchdowns last year, which was tied for the fewest in the NFL. But you look at Pierce and who he's going to compete against. He's in a backfield with a ton of veteran players, guys like Marlon Mack, Rex Burkhead, Royce Freeman. That's an uninspiring, I'd say, Houston backfield. And so it's different than if you look at Stevenson, because Pierce isn't competing with someone like Damian Harris. And in my opinion, you look at Pierce, he has an easier path to fantasy football relevancy, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm totally with you there. With Stevenson, it's like we know the Patriots backfield. We know no matter what, they're going to divide the roles. Like, if he had more pass catching upside, I know James White is out and maybe JJ Taylor steps up, but if Stevenson could somehow get that like pass catching role and also get some of that rushing, that's when I'd be more interested. But yeah, like you said, it's ambiguous backfield, and you expect them to score more touchdowns. So we'll see what happens. Texans are they're interesting for sure. It's going to come down to like, our defense is just going to like pack the box against Mills. Are they going to, what does he do against pressure? Like, how does he respond? Are they going to respect his arm? And if they can respect his arm and they can get more light fronts, I mean, that's going to help everyone. That's going to help light boxes. It's going to help you rush the ball. So, okay. I think
real quick, Nate, uninspiring was a very generous way to describe the backfield there. Not picking Ramondre. Are you concerned about who's calling the plays in New England? Does that worry you about taking offensive players from the Patriots?
Oh, just in general, like we looking at running back, wide receiver.
Yeah.
Everything as a whole. Yeah, I'm not overly concerned. It's still Bill Belichick and company that's that's in command of the ship, so to speak. And so I think with the Patriots, I'm like, you've got a number of, I think, intriguing like fantasy football values that are there. I know we're talking about the running back room, but at wide receiver, I know they added Devontae Parker, which, may kind of perk, fantasy managers up, but I still believe the passing game will go through like Jacoby Myers. But you also have like a late round tight end target like in Hunter Henry that's there, that'll be more involved than people think. And so it's not a fantasy football bonanza, I guess we could say, but they do have a number of players that can help your fantasy team.
And they've shown a penchant for zigging when everybody zags. I wonder if they plan on trying to win these 17, 14 ball games that the league has totally shifted from, right? Everybody's trying this a race to 30. Do you think that they will zag now and really rely on the running backs and the two tight ends?
Yeah, I could see that happening, because they do have two very capable tight ends. Now, with Smith, Geno Smith, who knows if he'll be more involved like in the passing game, but you got Hunter Henry that's there, and I'm sure they want to add a little bit more to the plate, of Mac Jones, but they've got, very great running back by committee that's there. And so I can easily see them leaning more on their offensive line and the running back room there. And then when necessary, just unleashing Mac Jones. But they don't necessarily have to say, hey, Mac Jones, we need you to go be, Josh Allen for this season. He could easily build up to that. But just knowing how methodical Belichick can be, I think it'll be something like in phases. So we'll get a little taste of it going into this year, but I just don't see them completely handing the keys to the car over to Mac Jones, if that's what you're asking, Doug.
That's sort of, yes. I completely agree with you.
I feel like Mac Jones is like really underrated, especially in Dynasty. I mean, I know I'm a degenerate and I've done 3 or 4 startups so far, and he goes well after Zach Wilson in almost every draft I've seen. And it's like, man, you've seen him have a good first year. I mean, what else do you need to see from the guy? There's more questions about Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields and Zach Wilson than there is about Mac Jones, yet he goes so late. It's almost like a little bit of like Derek Carr or Kirk Cousins, where they're just not spectacular, but they're really good quarterbacks. And I mean, he's so young, you're going to have him on your team for 10 more years, hopefully. So, I mean, he's not in redraft. Yeah. He has no appeal to me whatsoever, but man, in Dynasty, I mean, it might be a buying opportunity, but all right. I think I got 2 more rounds here. So the first one, we got a guy who's near and dear to our hearts, and Jahan Dotson, who I'm sure you're not following like Commanders as closely as maybe some of us like me and Doug, but I mean, Redskins or Washington fans think Dotson is like the next Santana Moss or something. Like the reports coming out about him are so glowing, which is good. It's a lot like Terry McLaurin during his like rookie year. Like you just hear nothing but good things about him. And I mean, his career honestly in college was really similar to Chris Olave in a lot of ways. It's kind of funny, but like he just didn't play for a good organization and with a good quarterback. But so the question is, Jahan Dotson at pick 136, which I think is really late for him, honestly. Like most other rookies, they get so much more helium than he does. And maybe it's because I know there's a stigma with the Commanders, but so it's Jahan Dotson at 136 or our former commander, Jamison Crowder at pick 134.
Yeah, my preference here is actually Dotson. You brought up some good points, Nate. I think he's going to feast on like single coverage in Washington, because you know that Terry McLaurin is going to command a lot of defensive attention. But when you look at the quarterback situation, though, Carson Wentz, can help this team. I'm like, he was one of the I think he was one of the best, I would say, deep ball passers in 2021. Got my words kind of jumbled up there. And you look at Dotson. I mean, he's going to be running a ton of downfield routes. They're going to try to attack defenses vertically, and that's something Dotson can help them with. And so he's another player, like you mentioned, who's going late, who's readily available, but he's another type of player I would say that could exceed expectations of fantasy managers this season. So I prefer Dotson over Crowder.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what, he was one of the most like pressed receivers in college football the last 4 years. Like the reason he was pressed a lot is part of it's like Big Ten. You watch college football, so like Big Ten, they press a lot more. But also it's like you see his size. It's like, why am I not going to test you? And he's played for 4 years, so he's going to have a lot more press coverage anyway. But he's going to play in the slot here in Washington for the most part, so he's not going to get pressed as much. He's going to be running open a lot, like you see like Doug Baldwin. Actually, he reminds me of like, this sounds bad because this is like we're talking about upside, like ceiling. He's like a mix between Tyler Lockett and then like Doug Baldwin in the sense that like he has great hands. He always can adjust to the ball and he knows how to get open. So I think he's going to be just fine. I think a year from now, I can almost guarantee if he stays healthy, his dynasty stock is going to increase. Like it's just some guys it's obvious, like you can just tell. Like Elijah Moore was like this last year, and Elijah Moore was a better prospect. Don't get me wrong, I like him better, but like you can just tell with some guys their value is going to appreciate in a year. Like there's guys like Christian Watson, like I'm not sure about him, but some of these guys they're undervalued. Maybe it's just because like people don't like the Jets, they don't like the Commanders, they stay away from Carson Wentz, they stay away from these teams that aren't very sexy. But no matter what, like their value is going to go up, and I think Dotson is a guy who like he should be going higher. Like why isn't he going closer to Garrett Wilson, or why isn't he going closer to even Olave? Like he could have a big target share. And I mean, Wentz, you're right. Wentz he's a roller coaster for sure, but he's being drafted like quarterback 28, quarterback 29. Like he's probably going to finish around quarterback 18 or 19, if I had to guess. And I mean, he's top 5 in the league in deep ball completion percentage, top 5 in target accuracy. I mean, he's right up there at the top, like you talked about. So needless to say, like we do like Dotson a lot here.
And that's not to say that Crowder shouldn't feast in that offense, because I do think that he will. And Nate, I'm glad that you brought that up, and I will continue saying it on this show because I think people have a misconception of how they plan on using Dotson. Definitely in the slot, though. I mean, expect when healthy. I've just lost his name now.
Curtis Samuel?
Yes, to play outside on the boundary more than I think the general population probably thinks he's going to be moved around in gadget style. Sure, there'll be some of that, but expect him to get a lot of work on the boundary.
Yeah.
The skill group is not bad. I know like the fantasy world like hates the Commanders, but their skill group is pretty solid. I would say they're like top 15 or something like that. All right. So one more for you, and we appreciate your time again. So Isaiah Spiller at pick 138 or Ronald Jones at pick 129. I know Isaiah Spiller, just like everyone just assumes he's going to get the Melvin Gordon role from a few years ago, like Joshua Kelly was supposed to, like Josh Jackson was supposed to. But I mean, it's definitely appealing if Eckler gets less touches or he gets hurt or something like that. And then Ronald Jones is just a pure, like someone in this offense in the backfield is going to be good. You just have to assume, but I mean, I know my favorite fantasy analyst, and maybe I'm just biased, it's always going to be Sean Siegel. Like anytime Sean Siegel puts anything out, like I have to listen to what he says, and he thinks Ronald Jones is going to break out this year. And if Sean Siegel is saying that, like he has a crystal ball, man, I'm telling you. So I know it sounds far-fetched. He's not going to be involved in the passing game, but I know he's a better runner than Clyde or McKinnon or whoever else they have there. So like, it's possible he could just get all those like James Conner type touches in a good offense. So, I mean, they both have appeal, but what do you think?
Yeah, I'm chuckling because I know you mentioned Sean Siegel, and with spending many years like at RotoViz, like I actually prefer like Ronald Jones as well, because that's why I'm smiling, because I was like that's the guy that I would rather have, because I'm like here's the deal. It's like the Chiefs are looking, we'll say, for a spark, like in their backfield after Clyde Edwards-Helaire has, he's been injured off and on. He's not met expectations statistically. You just consider, what they gave up to draft him. I'm assuming that they would want more returns statistically than what they've gotten. So Kansas City, Ronald Jones is out there. They bring him in, and they brought him in for a reason. And so I think he'll see touches in this committee. And you kind of hinted at this as well, as like we've watched running backs be very productive in fantasy when they're with the Kansas City Chiefs. So I would say like stashing someone like Jones could end up being like a league winning decision. And he's someone that I would try to hold as best as you can, because I'll kind of close this answer out with this. I'm like, we've all had those scenarios where you've had those players that you drafted late or picked up on the waiver wire early that you ended up releasing to the free agent pool, that have gone on to help others, not you, win leagues. So don't be that person in 2022. I think Ronald Jones could be that type of a player, so make sure you can hold on to him.
I mean, speaking of Siegel, I feel like he's a great zero running back candidate there. I'm always looking for the next, people, there's like this weird stigma with zero running back, but like, I think it's a good process to understand like which running back, if something breaks right, can have like league winning upside. And there's quite a few of them that they're maybe they're backups, but they do have a role. And if the most injured position in sports gets injured, because it happens all the time, like what is their upside? And I feel like Ronald Jones is a perfect, and Isaiah Spiller too. Also, don't get me wrong. Like I think Isaiah Spiller will have a role from week one. I don't think he was man, he's a roller coaster too, right? Because there's a point where a lot of like analysts were saying he was running back 1 or running back 2. And it's almost like his stock has dropped almost too much because like I know he's better than Joshua Kelly, and Jackson isn't there anymore. And oh gosh, who's their other guy? Roundtree. I saw him play actually last year. I got to go to a Washington game, and I mean he's just your average run-of-the-mill running back. So I could see Spiller having a role. And if Eckler got hurt because he is getting up there, and he even said like he said this a few times, like I need less carries, I need less touches, I need to keep my body fresh. And from those videos, he keeps his body fresh, but he needs to lighten the load. I mean, that's a guy who I want to keep him around. He needs to be like the ambassador for fantasy because he's such a cool guy. And there's another tangent for me, but I like both of them. Needless to say.
Yeah. Another great option.
We'll get you out of here. I've got 2 questions that I always ask everybody on the way out. Do you have a preference for fantasy football as far as like zero running back or hero running back? There's all these different ways that people like to play. Do you have a preference? And how many leagues are you in this year?
Yeah, I'll say to answer the first part of the question, I really don't have like a preference, kind of going into a draft, having like, I'm going to do this strategy. It's a zero RB. What kind of helps me dictate on which path I'll take? I like to use positional tiers, quite a bit. So always have my positional tiers put together, and I monitor closely like the supply and demand of all the different positions that are out there. Because, it's been some drafts you're in where, running backs are going, early and often. It's others where you're like, oh, wow, we're kind of people are selecting wide receivers a lot earlier than what I thought. And so I just let the other managers in the league that I'm in kind of dictate, what strategy, that I'll implement. And the positional tiers are a big part of that. And I guess for the second part of the question, I lost my train of thought, Doug. What's the second part of the question?
How many leagues are you in this year?
Yeah, for leagues. And you know what's funny? I don't participate like in a ton of leagues. Usually like each year it's like 2, maybe 3. Last year it was only 2. But I do play like a lot of DFS.
Right.
And so, I do like putting together DFS lineups, every week. But as far as like season long leagues, I don't participate in a ton of those. And that was one thing whenever I had my previous job, kind of doing both careers, so to speak. It's that was one thing that I had to like cut because I needed more time to create content instead of necessarily worrying about what was going on in my own leagues. And so I still kind of keep that same approach. I doubt I'd be in more than 3 for this year, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
The goal is always to learn something new on Wednesdays. I think we did that today. Eric, thank you so much, and I'll include the link to your stuff with the live stream here. So thank you so much for joining us today.
No, sounds good. Yeah, once those links are posted, I'll definitely retweet those. But hey, thanks again, gentlemen, for the invite. And I'll just encourage everyone that's watching is just follow me on Twitter at Eric N Moody. If you like fantasy football, sports betting, you're in the right place. Also, a little dash of 1990s nostalgia. I got you covered as well. But at ESPN, I cover the NFL, NBA, and WNBA. From a fantasy sports and sports betting lens. So I look forward to interacting with everyone. Thanks again, gentlemen. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nate, I'll see you next week.
All right. Have a good one, guys. Thanks.
Take care.